If you've been thinking the Latari need more hooved units in their army, then look no farther, because that's what you're going to find with the Ventala Skirmishers unit for the Runewars miniatures game. Alrighty, before me I have the Ventala Skirmishers, the newest expansion for the Latari faction in the Runewars miniatures game. It reads, "Strike with javelin and blade. As the threat to the Grey Forest grows, more of its denizens fight alongside the Latari to preserve their homes. The Hu Ventala are nomadic hunters in times of peace, but unyielding warriors in battle. Circling the foe in long columns at full gallop, Ventala Skirmishers strike at short range with javelins and nets, and can easily outpace their quarry. When pressed, they swiftly turn to charge with their keen knives." Let's crack open this box and see what we have inside. Alrighty, so here it is before us. Let's take a quick look at the rulebook, see if there's any new rules. There isn't, but there's a boatload of lore. Let's just put this off the side and assemble everything we have. Alright, here's everything assembled before us, and now let's take a look at the figures themselves. So they're pretty big figures, actually, and they're great. They assemble pretty well. If you're worried about bent spears, I think they are at risk for having, the bent plastic, but these ones came out okay, and they were fairly easy to manipulate. All the pieces went together surprisingly well, and these are big models. I mean, these Ventala, they're not outrageously different, the two of them, just kind of varying degrees of the spear, but they go together nicely. They're very 3D. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to paint. One thing to note with this model here, with the spear angled downward, is when you square up to units, it is not easy. This guy is literally stabbing someone through the face, and that might be a little annoying for some, but the effect is good. You are wanting to stab them through the face, so there you go. So the first thing we're going to look at here is the actual Ventala unit card itself, and they have the same stats as the Leonx Riders, the 1 armor, 2 health. They have both a ranged and a melee attack. The melee attack is red and blue, and the ranged attack is just red. So single dice for ranged attack is not amazing, and then 2 dice for melee is fine, but it's certainly no Leonx Rider. They do have the ability, ranged attack. If the defender is at range 1 to 3, add a blue dice. So they do want to be in the close range. That will bring them up to par with the amount of dice other ranged units benefit from. They say when you perform a march, you can decrease its speed by 1 or treat it as modified by a turn. And, these are not to be underestimated. The modifying with a turn is fantastic because, as we'll see with the dial later, this is very important. But decreasing your speed is also very valuable because, your opponent... the more information your opponent has to digest, the better. They do get protected 1. Why not? On the back side of their card, we can see, the point cost. So they can get all the way up to a 40-point unit, which is pretty hefty. But I think more importantly, they can have the 24-point unit, which is the 3 long. Now, granted, your rerolls are not going to be good if you're shooting from the side, but they do immediately get access to the training order slot and the music order slot, which is good. And I just don't see the 4 slot being run that often, at least as far as I can tell. So the first of the upgrades you get in this expansion is a training slot, and it's kind of the bread and bones, if you will, of this unit. It's the flank fire. So you can draw line of sight and perform a ranged attack using your side firing arcs. If you drew line of sight from your side firing arc or terrain occupied by you, your threat is equal to the number of partial and full ranks, And then also your rerolls become the number in your front rank. So, for example, if you had a 3 long column of Ventala, your threat would be 3. Now, a couple things to point out here is, for 5 points, that's not very bad. That's, it's fairly affordable. But your side firing arcs on a column is very large. I mean, it's not to be scoffed at, but it's also, you can draw. So you can still shoot from the front. You can also shoot from the side. So this is kind of the bread and butter of the Ventala and their, circling and shooting mechanic. They have access to this at their smallest formation and their largest formation. But what's interesting is that it is not unique to the Ventala. This is a latari training slot. So heaven forbid you have a Deepwood Archer unit who can now shoot from both their sides and their front using Wind Rune. I mean, there's basically no stopping them. But what I was thinking is, how about taking a hero like Megan Cinderwind and giving this to her? Because now she can shoot from every side but one. Of course, she already is just one unit, so there's no downside to her having this card. It just means that she can basically shoot anyone at range 5. So I think that's going to be very cool. What's more is you get 2 of these cards, and this is going to be a theme throughout this unit. You get a shed load of cards. So the next card you get, and you also get 2 of them, is the Hedge Shroud, and it's a training slot card for 2 points. It says, while defending at range 1 to Nature Rune of overgrown terrain, you can exhaust this card to treat your defense as the Nature Rune value. So it's a shame that this is competing for the training slot, as the Ventala are obviously more akin to using the flank fire. But it isn't unique to the Ventala, so potentially your Drenati Warriors or Leonks or something can use this, Deepwood Archers maybe. And, as long as you have 2 Nature Runes up, this is better than the vast majority of Latari. And if you have 3, then now you're cooking with gas, basically. It is Exhaust the card, but, with Rallying Starling and stuff, I think you can keep this up fairly well, and it's while defending, so it's always going to be useful to you as long as the Nature Runes are in your favor. I like that this is promoting a type of gameplay around the manipulation of Nature Runes and the further flushing out of the overgrowth mechanic. I think it's cool, but it's hard to say if it'll see play over the flank fire. The next upgrade, and again you also get 2, is an armor slot upgrade called Bolo Nets. Now this is a skill. It says discard this card to choose an unengaged enemy at range 1 to 3, and in line of sight that unit receives an immobilization token. So this is kind of like a Vicious Roots that can be placed on any of the Latari units. Now what's interesting is that the Ventala are actually kind of the least likely to benefit from this, because their skill dial is on their secondary, and that means that they'd have to do this instead of shooting, which I can't really see them doing. Unless they want to run away. But what's very cool is that your Deepwood Archers actually can use this right away. They have access to this slot right away. And I think this is an amazing addition to them, as they can shoot and Bolonet. Now granted, they do have to be range 1 to 3, which is kind of a scary place to be. You could also equip this to your Drenati Warriors, who also have access to this right away, if you instead want to use your Warriors to keep enemies from getting to your cookie jar. Lastly, you could even equip this to your Scion unit, who get access to this at a 2 block. If you really wanted to be nasty, you could have Vicious Roots and Bolo Nets, and just make your opponent rage quit the game right away. So I think this card's pretty powerful, actually. The lockdown is amazing. The next 2 upgrades are oldies but goodies. They're Tempered Steel and Master-Crafted Weapons, which if you didn't have already, sure, throw them in there, why not? But the upgrade after that is the Honor Markings. This is a standard upgrade, and it's a Steadfast to Fear. So if you're doing a Fear morale test, you have 1 additional morale icon, which is good. I haven't found much use for these, honestly. I would rather run something else or save the points, but there you go. I mean, at least you have them. The last 2 upgrades you get are champion slot upgrades. It is called Warden of Horn and Branch. It's a skill. Choose an enemy at range 1 to 5 and in line of sight. Roll a blue dice for each Ventala ally at range 1 to 3 of that unit that has line of sight of that enemy. For each surge rolled, that enemy suffers 2 damage. This is a very interesting skill. We're going to talk about this more in the gameplay section at the end of the review, but it is not unique to the Ventala, and it has a very high damage potential. I mean, you can roll a double surge on a blue dice, so for each Ventala you can do 4 damage, and I think there's some potential here, that's for sure, so we'll talk about this more in the gameplay section. So all in, you are getting 12 upgrade cards, which is pretty immense, and I love the 2 of each. Maybe this is something they're going to do in the future. I don't know. So we're going to talk about the dial here, and first thing to note is, holy smokes, did you see that right? You did. It was a ranged attack on the secondary dial. I believe this is the first we've seen. They can also do, of course, reform at 5 and shoot, shift at 1 and shoot. They have a move 3 at initiative 7, move 4 at initiative 8. Now these can of course be modified by turns from their passive. Their speed can be decreased by 1, so quite the maneuverable unit, these Ventala. Next up are the red modifier in action, so a melee attack at initiative 4, which is consistent with many other of the units in Runewars. And they can dial in a hit, which is honestly better than the reanimates, so what's not to like? Now the blue actions on their dial are low speed, low initiative maneuvers. I think they're probably for charging and kind of basically charging, I think. And yeah, nothing remarkable. They can't shoot when they do it. In fact, they can only do their white actions, white modifiers, which is skill, rally, sharp turn, and charge. So nothing too remarkable that way. Overall, their modifiers pair fairly well with the green actions on their dial, and of course they have this massive initiative melee or ranged attack at initiative 8. I'm not really sure why you would shoot so late. I don't know, doesn't come to mind, so maybe there's a tactic I'm not seeing. Now I'm going to show some Ventala gameplay footage where we kind of put the ideas we've talked about here into the flesh, because sometimes seeing is believing, I guess. Anyway, hope you enjoy. Alrighty, so before us we have a scenario that I think is going to be really powerful, and that's the Ventala getting into the cookie jar, if you will. So we've got ourselves an archer unit of reanimates here, and then 2 3 long Ventala skirmishers. This is a great spot to be. This unit here, 3 boxes will get you 2 of these setups here. You have access to the training ability here. So this is flank fire, draw a line of sight from your side firing arc, and if you do, you use the threat, as if you were facing them from the side, and then your rerolls are actually what are your front rank, so you just get 1. But what makes this really cool is these guys are really quick and maneuverable. So this is what we have on them, and of course the reanimates fire at initiative 5. So what these guys are able to do is they can dial in a move 4 and shoot. And the thing about that passive skill is that it says you can draw a line of sight. So they can shoot from the front still, but they can also shoot from the side. What we would imagine here is, probably the reanimates either shifting or, using their fire ability at initiative 5. So let's say they're using their fire ability at initiative 5, and these guys are going to move at 8 and shoot, let's say. So the round plays out, and we can see that they're actually outside of range 5, so the firing doesn't go off. But then what's more is that these guys get to move a 4 forward at initiative 8, which is really incredible. I mean, these guys are one of the only units who can fire on their secondary dial. For most folks, it's a primary action. So we'll go ahead and move these skirmishers here, like this. All right. So they can draw a line of sight from their side firing arc or whatever. But so the next round, the reanimates are looking pretty scared here. But same thing. I guess they could dial in a a shot at 5. These guys go for just bonk into them, I guess. And then these fellas here you'd have shoot. So these guys are going at initiative 4, and they're going to do a 4, and with the Ventala passive, they get the they can choose to turn. So we'll go and hit and square up, and then these guys are going to be screwed at initiative 5 because they're engaged. They'd get a panic token, of course. But then you have this other unit who kind of has free range, so you can go and shoot and move along straight and get the firing arc and just start peppering them from the side. And then what's more with these guys is, as the name suggests, you can actually shift shoot. So this Ventala here can actually disengage and shoot, and then they can reform and shoot and carry on their merry way. So what I kind of envision this Ventala unit being able to do is almost like the medieval battles of old, where you have the poor units in the middle of the map, and these Ventala basically forming the wheel and just kind of running around shooting them. Because again, even if these Ventala are moving at these big long 3 or 4 moves, at any time they can actually modify that with a turn and shoot. So we're talking about 3 turns all day long, coming around, shooting from your side, firing arc. And what makes it really challenging for a unit like this is, they can only fire from the front, and so you might be able to actually stay out of their firing arc or cause them to reform. So that's actually a pretty amazing skill. Another cool thing these guys have is this Warden of Horn and Branch, which does take up a champion slot and is 5 points. So the jury's still out on whether that's a very good trade, but it's a champion slot and it's not unique to the Ventala. So if you did want to have it on them, they would need to be a 4-block unit, which is 30 points, which is very expensive. But what's interesting is that your Deepwood Archers can run this, and your Drenati Warriors can run this, and it just says simply choose an enemy at range 1 to 5 and in line of sight. So I can imagine you having, a 4-block of Drenati Warriors coming into the mix. You have your Ventala kind of in and amongst the enemy. Say for the purpose of this video that these Flesh Rippers here are Drenati Warriors. Well, it would say choose an enemy at range 1 to 5 and in line of sight, which is this. It doesn't have to be unengaged, it can be anything. And roll a blue dice for each Ventala ally at range 1 to 3, which these both are. So you take your 2 blue dice, because there's 2 blue Ventala, you roll, and it says for each surge, they take 2 damage. So these guys would take 4 damage. And that's something that I think is going to be really interesting. Again, just this, harnessing the Ventala all over the battlefield to pepper people as you play. So those are some of the cool mechanics. The flank fire does not have to be on your Ventala. It can be on your Deepwood Archers if you so chose. And there's some cool ways that can come into play ahead. So really interesting stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. New videos come out every Friday or Saturday. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like or even subscribing to the channel, or you can leave me a comment in the section below. Until next video, I'll see you then. Thanks.